Oh,
All right, we're
it says the
live.
broadcast is live. All right.
Hey, this
Here
is
we are.
Sherry Minelli, and Ron Minelli, and we have our special guest of our first Unstrung Hero live stream, and it's Maddi oh no, now I'm gonna mess up your name, Schieferstein, John Petrucci's tech, and tonight we're talking about what's that? I'm getting feedback, I guess.
Uh-oh.
Anyway,
Oh,
we're talking tonight
oh
about
no.
what's that? Can you hear me?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, all right. Well, tonight we're
Now you're all
There's
talking
a
all
crackling.
there's
about
a big
John's
delay
gig.
now for some reason.
Uh-oh. And the IR and any other questions that anybody else has. So hopefully, if you're around, you post some questions here. Maddie rules. Ha ha ha. Anyway,
Berserk.
Excellent.
so yeah, this is our first time. So be easy on us, people. We're not good at this live stream yet. Hey, Maddie. So do you want to talk about who you are and your big announcement yesterday?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Maddi Schieferstein. As most people know me, I am John Petrucci's guitar tech. Started working for Dream Theater about 24 years ago and been full time for about 14 years now. Worked with a bunch of other people in the past as well, but kind of found my home and landed here in the Dream Theater camp. So, so that's the brief overview, I guess. And then the big announcement was that John launched his company Tone Mission yesterday, and I am a part of that company. And we launched the first product, which is the John Petrucci IR Collection Volume 1. And you can go to tonemission.com and check out all the videos and demos and all kinds of stuff. But it's a cool package of impulse responses from John's mic'd up studio setup from 3 different records. And we use different microphones, different preamps for each record for different flavors. And it came out really well. So the response has been really nice. And I don't know. Hopefully it continues to grow.
So when did you guys decide to start doing this, and how long have you been on this project?
So what happened was in 2020, we finished a European tour at Dream Theater, and then COVID shut everything down. And at that point, I was at home in Florida where I live, and John and our engineer, Jimmy T, were at home in New York. And John called me up one day and says, I've decided to record my next solo record. And I went, okay, cool. We had built when we'd finished the previous record, Distance Over Time, with Dream Theater, we ended up consolidating all of our storage into a new facility. And within that facility, there was enough space to build like a small studio room. So we had done that for the band to rehearse in, but never really thought about making a recording studio. And when John said, I'm going to record my solo album, immediately Jimmy T, our engineer, and I went, okay, we got to build a studio now. So what do we have to do? And it was kind of for John's solo record, it was just him and Jimmy T. I didn't go up to New York for it. I stayed at home. They would call me, if they needed something, and I'd help them out over the phone. But otherwise, John just sat there and wrote the record and recorded the guitar tracks. And then once all the songs were done and the guitars were recorded, then I went up there. We set up a drum kit. Mike Portnoy, who played on the record, came in and cut the drum tracks. Dave LaRue, who played bass on the record, did his stuff at home in his studio. But at that point, while the cabinet was still set up and mic'd up, Jimmy T went, we should try shooting some IRs. Let's just see if we can do it. So he took it upon himself to start learning how to do it, and went through and refined his process. And all of a sudden, when we were doing the next thing that we did in the studio is we did Liquid Tension Experiment, because everybody had time off. And him and I sat around one night and compared the IRs he shot to the recorded guitar tracks from John's solo record. and it was a spot on recreation of it. So it was like, oh, okay, now we're onto something. So with LTE, we went, once we set up and mic up the guitar rig and get the sound, we're going to shoot IRs for that. And then, the follow up to that was the next Dream Theater record. So now it was just kind of like, the idea was just to capture that moment in time in the recording process. Those microphones, the way they're blended into the DAW, the preamps that were used, the speaker cabinet, which mainly for all three of those records, the speaker cabinet was the same. It was a standard rectifier 412 with vintage 30s, but then John's also got a bunch of other cabinets. So Jimmy shot IRs of those as well. And that's in the bonus folder in the IR pack that you can download. But it was sort of during the Dream Theater record, him and I would sit there at the studio late at night, finishing up for the day. And we just kick around a bunch of ideas about stuff, oh, we should look into maybe getting this preamp for the studio, or we should look into, this thing, whatever it was. And at one point or another, the IRs came up and the idea sort of hatched of this could be a marketable product. And so that was in 2020. And it really kind of took, I guess, almost 3 years to get it to market. Simply because, there was always something in the way that was happening. And finally, we just sort of sat down with John one day and said, listen, we have this idea. We want to pursue it. This should be a Tone Mission thing. And let's launch the Tone Mission brand. And this can be the first product. And so we put it together, and we've spent the last maybe 3 months really building all the infrastructure for Tone Mission. So the website, the customer support, all the content that people are seeing on the website and social media, the influencers. We had Ola Englund and Rabia Masad, I believe is how you say his last name. They did videos for us, review videos, and they came out great. So yeah, it's been a big undertaking, all while being on the road with Dream Theater touring. So, but it's now out in the wild.
Okay.
Very cool.
And
I
was actually
here.
Last night was, I think, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
What are they?
Well, Daniel says that those IRs are incredible. He's been using them nonstop since the release, which is kind of cool.
Yep.
And then
cool. Awesome.
He also mentioned that he noticed that his beard growth has doubled since using it.
I don't know if that's a normal side effect of your IRs.
Yeah, that's perfect.
But actually, he has a real question. He says, a real question about the, let's see. Oh, I think I can, I can show these real questions.
There you go.
Oh.
Actually, a real question about the IR. Does Maddie have a favorite combination of, I think he means combining instead of combing, unless you're combing the beard, of the IRs in stereo?
Wow, that's a great question. I kind of stick with the Recto Rhythm blend from the Dream World pack. So that would have been from the Dream Theater record. To be honest with you, once we kind of got through all the beta testing and everything, we've been using them sporadically during the day. Like we've got a quad cortex and of course a fractal out here and stuff. So we've been kind of checking them out through that, but I haven't actually sat down personally and really played through them very much since it was all finalized. But I would say the Recto Rhythm blend from the Dream World pack is probably my go-to. So, and the lead blend from that pack.
So, so is John using JP2C all the time now, or is he still using the older amps? We had someone ask if he's still using his Mark II-C Plus.
No, so everything has been the JP2C ever since it was released. So that would have been 2016-ish, somewhere in there.
Wow, has it been that long already?
Yeah, I know. So that's been on every record and every tour since it was released. The only time we'll go backwards is maybe in the studio, and we have just a ton of amplifiers, mostly Mesa Boogie at the studio. So we can, like, we reamped through a Triple Crown just to see what that would sound like. We have a Fillmore. We've got was it Transatlantic? Was that the one? It's kind of more of a British style amplifier. But really, it just keeps coming back to the JP2C. So that's what we use in the studio and on the road. So everything that you're hearing live on not only the Dream Theater tour, but the Dream Sonic tour we're currently on is all the JP2C.
Cool.
Okay.
So yeah.
And that was Andrew asking the question. He's a rocket scientist.
Oh.
He just bought a GT.
Andrew, all
He
right.
was in here last week. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. You guys have had that GT for a while now, haven't you?
Yeah. So I can't remember exactly when you first released it, but we have, I believe it's one of the first 10 that were ever made for production. We still have it, still use it.
Nice. That's nice to hear, for sure.
Yeah, it's actually on the B rig pedal board currently, because that at some point or another, when the gear all shifted around, that pedal board went with the B rig. But yeah,
So
we just used it in Asia a couple months ago.
Is that like 11 or 12 years old then? Because what year did we come out with that? Was that 2012?
I think it actually was released in like early 2012.
Is that like an ode to Rush 2012 or something?
Yeah, right. No, it's only 100 years later. But yeah, I know. Yeah, you guys were really early adopters, and it was, you guys. I think you guys saw the NAMM demo that we did in 2011. It's like, how can we get one of these?
Yeah. Well, that was it. What happened was, John had been using the Axis Electronics FX1 for a lot of years, and Mario's a very dear friend of ours. And when Mario, I think he kind of closed Axis Electronics down and started doing something else, or working for somebody else at the time. We were doing a G3 tour in South America, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, we never carried a spare pedal board with us. Just never really occurred to anybody. And when we did that tour, John said, let's put together a really tiny rig. And I said, okay. So we ended up putting together a rig with a tri-axis preamp, a 290 power amp, and an Axe-Fx. And that was it. So we had the FX1 and we had the rack wah and all that stuff. But we got up to Mexico City and we load in. I hook up the rig, I power it on, the pedal board comes on, but nothing. Like, the screen's blank. It's just, kind of glowing the green that it used to glow, and none of the LEDs are lighting up. And I'm like, oh no. So I call Mario immediately and I said, what do I do? And he goes, well, open it up, make sure all the ribbon cables are seated, do this, do that. When you power it up, hold this button, press that button. It'll launch into a self-test sequence or whatever. So we're doing all this crazy stuff. And I'm on the phone with him and I'm doing all the different things, and it's just not coming back. And at one point he said to me, he goes, listen, get it home. We'll get it fixed. It's just not going to be today. And I went, okay. So now I have to figure out what to do. And at that point, it clicked in my head, well, maybe I should see if there's like a ground control pro, or somebody's got to have a MIDI foot controller around here somewhere. So that night, I actually ended up using an ART foot controller from one of those old, I remember those like old pink and black preamp things that they had.
Yeah,
and
like had
just basically
the 80s,
set up basic.
Like kind of,
Yeah, with the big rubber
thing
buttons on it.
Yep. Something
Yeah.
like
So
X15 or something like that.
something like that. Yeah. And so I borrowed one of those from a guitar player who was coming to the show, and I set up just basic presets because with the Triaxis, it was just like, you could set up program changes. It was pretty simple. So the next day, I ended up having to buy a Ground Control Pro from a distributor. They had to put it on an airplane to get from Mexico City to Monterey, or vice versa. Sorry, I think from Monterey to Mexico City. Had to have a courier pick it up at the airport, drive it to the gig. While this is all happening, I'm sitting there waiting. I've downloaded the manual on my computer, reading the manual from top to bottom. It had been years since I used one of those. And I'm like, okay, well, so when it gets here, I have to set up this and I have to program this to do that. I kind of went through all the steps mentally. It showed up. I took it in the dressing room, plugged it into a power supply, programmed it blind without plugging it into the rig, took it downstairs at changeover, plugged it in, went through all the presets. Everything worked. John went on stage and did the show.
Okay, that's an unstrung hero. That is the definition of an unstrung hero.
Should have gotten a medal for that or something.
Oh, I don't know. But that kind of set us off on finding a new controller. And that's John had actually stumbled onto that YouTube video and sent it to me. And he goes, check this out. And I watched it and I went, And I immediately joined your forum, I think, and was kind of poking around to see what I could do. And I was trying to be discreet to just not let anybody know what we were up to. And I think, Ron, didn't you send me an email or something saying like, is this really who I think it is? Something like that.
I thought you called us. I thought you called and I'm like,
maybe I did. Yeah.
Like, I don't think John Petrucci's tech, or you might have emailed us, and I'm like, oh my gosh, wow.
I wouldn't have known you by name at that time.
Right.
So yeah. But that's definitely one of the things where if you're world touring, really definitely have multiple controllers, because
I do now.
we make it. I'm glad that ours have worked out well for you, but man, it's like there are hundreds and hundreds of components that go in there, and they all have to work all the time. And
well, and then you get like FedEx or anybody. We've had trucks run over gear, or or if you have like somebody with their guitar slamming it down like 9-inch. Pearl Jam did that, and 9-inch Nails, I think.
Yeah,
but,
there's some damage out there on the road.
But John seems pretty gentle.
Yeah, respectful of the equipment.
So I remember getting in touch with you guys. You sent me one to check out, and I was just so at that point we were kind of graduating into a bigger Triaxis rig, because it was like, this sounds cool. It's a nice little setup. So I was in my garage building the guitar rig, and the Mastermind showed up. I plugged it in, and within 10 minutes I had it basically programmed, just without really even going in depth into anything. I just read how to get into the setup menu and set up the devices, the MIDI channels, started naming buttons. And I think this was pre-editor too, maybe.
Yeah,
I was doing it all on the Mastermind.
Yeah, the editor was about 6
within
months
10
later.
minutes I was. So I was like, John, this thing's great. We got to get this. And so there we were. Now
it was kind of frightening because you were one of the first 10, and I think 9-inch Nails also was like one of the first. And so it was like, okay, hope that there's no, back then, hope there's no like major bugs or anything. And I don't know, did we end up adding any firmware for you guys? I know 9-inch Nails, we had to add a dimmer because the lighting guy was having a fit that we were ruining the show.
It's like all the screens were like like reflecting up on their legs and stuff like that in the dark, on the dark stage and all that. And so I'm not sure if I've ever
we like it like that, because then John can actually see the fretboard a little bit where he's got to put his hands.
Oh, there you go.
So, but yeah, you guys, you did a bunch of stuff with us, and it was that Triaxis rig, and I think Fractal had just come out with the XL Plus unit. It was either the Mark II or the XL Plus. I can't remember which one it was. But we had installed those in the rig, and they had implemented a bunch of firmware stuff on their end. And all of a sudden, we couldn't get the mastermind to do what we wanted it to do. And I remember sitting in a studio with Matt Picone and John and myself, and we had you on the phone, Ron. And you and Matt were going back and forth. And then every 5-10 minutes, my email would ding and there'd be a new file. Okay, install this and see if that works. And like,
I mean,
it was firmware in real time. Yeah. And, you know, I don't remember how long it took, but it was, I mean, it was the whole process in the end, you know, lasted a while, but just that immediacy and the customer support that you gave us to get it up and running, because we couldn't get it to do what we wanted it to do. But by creating that firmware on the spot, it was all of a sudden, it's like, oh, cool. Now we can do this. You know, now what John has in his head, what he wants it to do and react to is happening. So yeah, that was a fun day.
Yeah, and I think there was a fair amount of, I seem to remember a fair amount of, maybe not like real-time firmware updates, but I seem to remember I was involved in your cutting over to the AXFX3 as well.
Yeah.
You like kind of redoing your whole set. You were using that time to like kind of recreate your whole setup or something, kind of start from scratch, if I recall.
Yeah. Well, you know, the interesting thing about that is so the programming that's in the mastermind currently is still from, I mean, not the firmware is current, but the origination of the basic programming of what each button does and what it controls is from that original programming session. And then what I've done is just like when we switched over to the AXFX3, just made sure that all the CC numbers were the same numbers, so the buttons would control the same things. And now it's kind of getting a little like there's too much weird stuff in there anymore. So once this tour's over and once we get through John's guitar camp in a couple of weeks, I'm going to sit at home and just start from scratch and rebuild it from the ground up. But it's, you know, we've never really had enough time to sit down and go, okay, let's just start with a blank slate and start over. You know, it's always like, well, the gear's in transit somewhere or whatever, you know, and whatever the circumstance. So this time around, I think I'll have some time at home and I can sit and redo it.
Got it.
I got some comments here. So Tom is saying that, wow, Tom, you've got a GT, and he's saying it controls my entire double 48 space rack system with 10 amplifiers. I don't know.
Whoa,
is that really
Tom,
for real?
Tom, you gotta get a picture. I need to see that.
Pics.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a fan. I need to buy
Let's
it.
see.
That's good. Oh, yeah.
And we've got somebody named Franz here. Yeah, and then so Franz is here, and then Cooper. I know Cooper Carter did your
hey, Cooper.
yeah,
hey,
didn't
Cooper.
he do your videos for the IR?
Yeah, he did. He's so not only did he make demo videos for the IR packs, but he was actually the I guess videographer, director of all the content that we shot. So the documentary, the time lapse, all of the social media posts, all of the official Tone Mission content, Cooper actually created. So that's his other gig from being a guitar player and Fractal super genius.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, great job. I mean, it's the content came out amazing. Couldn't have asked for anything better. So
let's see. Yeah, thanks, Tom. We're so happy you're a fanboy. Oh, and then Matthew Phillips, we just met him a few weeks ago. He just bought a GT, and he was he was setting it up pretty fast before a show at the Del Mar Fair there.
Nice.
Oh, there's more.
Wait, I had a question there.
What's that? Oh, I did. Sorry.
Yeah, wait, yeah, yeah. What do you find the most challenging thing as a guitar tech touring at your level? Um, Power, maybe, I guess, would be like making sure that you have good power before you plug anything in. As far as like anything challenging, it's I've been with John for so long. We have a rapport and a system, and so everything is, it's not like I'm going in working for somebody new and I haven't met them or worked for them before. So there's no challenges in that respect.
Well,
Um,
except for hearing
it might
impaired.
it might. Oh, the hearing impaired system. Yeah. All right. This is a good story. Here you go,
Yeah, you
Matthew.
gotta tell that
This
one.
is the answer to your question. So this was in somewhere in the UK, and we were playing like one of these older city hall buildings or something, and get everything set up. We're line checking. The guitar rig sounded amazing that day. I mean, just the venue and the way everything was set, it just sounded really good. Band walks on stage for sound check. I give John the guitar, and this was, I think the Majesties were brand new at that point. So this was like we had just gotten them on the start of the tour. So it was still the Triaxis rig. It was the Majesties. John goes out, puts up the volume pedal, and the guitar is howling, like just this really horrible noise. And he put the volume pedal down. He just turns and looks at me and he's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "It was fine a minute ago. I don't know what's going on." So I thought, okay, maybe it's a tube in the preamp or something. So I'm starting to kind of patch stuff around, and I'm starting to get a little scatterbrained. And after about 10 or 15 minutes of this, I walked up to him and said, "Listen, I've got nothing right now. Just let's get through sound check. I will continue to work on the problem. It will be solved." And he goes, "No, I want it solved now." So, okay. So kind of going through some more stuff. I've exhausted pretty much all the options. And the one thing I kept noticing was anytime the volume pedal was up, we could hear ourselves talking through the guitar rig. And I'm like, I kind of threw it out the first couple of times I heard it, but then I'm like, wait a minute. Why am I hearing us talking? There's something allowing that to happen. And the guy from the venue just happened to be standing in front of the stage. And I looked at him, I said, "Is there a hearing impaired system in this room?" And he goes, "Yeah, there is." I said, "Is it on right now?" And he goes, "I don't know. It's up on the 5th floor. Let me go up and check." So we gave him a radio. He goes up to the 5th floor, calls down, goes, "Yeah, it's on right now." And I said, "All right, hold on." Turn the volume pedal up. Guitar's howling. Get on the radio, turn it off. Turns it off. Everything goes silent. And so anybody not familiar with a hearing impaired system, in the old days, it's basically just a big copper strip that they put up around the room. It's an induction loop. So for old style hearing aids, it just kind of rattles your hearing aid so you can hear it, right? All the new systems are Bluetooth or whatever now. So you don't have that problem. But it was just the weirdest thing. And everybody's looking at me like, I saved the day and I'm, super genius or whatever. And I'm like, I'm just glad that we got this figured out. Let's move on now. And so that kind of became the running joke. Anytime there was a weird noise, it's like, is there a hearing impaired system in this room? But the guy from the venue actually came up to me later. He pulled me aside. And he goes, "You're not the first person that's had this problem." He goes, "Every now and again, we'll get somebody come in here with a guitar rig and it does just that. So now I know if it happens again, I can just go shut it off." But what we didn't know was they had it set up on like a timer. So it would just click on at 5 o'clock every day, whether something was happening or not. And then it would shut itself off at whatever time they specified. So when we were doing line check, it was off. Everything was fine. Band comes in for 5 o'clock sound check. It clicks on, everything goes sideways. So yeah, so that was a challenge that day. We got it worked out and everything was good from that point.
So that's your second Unstrung Hero medal, I think.
Yeah, exactly. We should actually, that maybe we start
Maybe we should give out
getting
medals or
medals
something.
made and like sending them out to. that was like a near Spinal Tap moment there for you. That was That's something. But I mean, it's amazing that
Yeah,
you knew that even existed because, if it could have been just like this weird mystery thing, yet there's a copper strip around the entire venue, like broadcasting electromagnetic radiation.
yeah,
That's, yeah, no
yeah.
wonder
Well,
I
and somebody, J- I don't know if it was John or somebody else asked me later. They said, "How did you know that?" And I said, "I don't know." So clearly, somewhere in my history of being a guitar tech, I've run into that before somewhere or had heard of it before. But what, how it jogged my memory to go, is there a hearing impaired system in here? Is just beyond me. But we got it working. So that's the behind the scenes stuff. That's what we don't want the audience to see.
Well, and that's
Right.
the challenge
So
is things that are so unexpected that it's like, how are you supposed to figure that out? It's just kind of, oh,
yeah, yeah. Like I mean, we had a little issue a couple weeks ago, and it turned out it was a tube in an amp that was starting to go, and but it was such an intermittent problem, and it wasn't like the amp cut out completely. It's just the sound would change a little bit, and within your monitors you hear everything like a microscope. So we're like, what is going on? And well, finally, it took a couple of days to figure it out, but got it figured out. And we're all good now. So, but yeah, those are the challenges when you get those weird intermittent problems. So
But probably at this point, you've
that's
probably
why
seen it
maintenance is
all.
key.
Or
A fair bit, yeah. But it's all also too. It also depends on what equipment you're working with, who the artist is. If you're working for somebody who uses like a lot of vintage equipment, there's a
Mm,
whole set of things that could go wrong there, right? That you have to kind of gear yourself mentally to be prepared for. Whereas with John's rig, I put it together, I built it from the ground up, I made every cable in the thing. So if there's a problem, I know where to go with it. So it's nice when you can have that ability.
yeah,
So
that does make sense.
okay. So,
oh,
Ron,
what is Daniel asking?
oh,
Okay.
let's see. Where's Daniel?
No, you got it on the screen.
Yeah,
Oh,
Daniel.
okay, yes. Uh, would a mastermind be able to control an XFX and camera changes simultaneously? I'm not going to get that word for a situation such as live streaming.
Well, I mean, I've never seen that done before, but I mean, I believe I can't remember the name of the app. There's something up for Windows that basically like converts between like MIDI messages and like key presses and things like that. So kind of converting from the MIDI world to the PC world. And with something like that, I would imagine that would work. I don't know. You could contact me offline, and if you have specifics you could look at it. I mean, we're always interested in seeing what else we can do with it. We've had some pretty crazy stuff that people have controlled with their GT and all that. So yeah, we can take a look at that and be
Yeah,
interesting.
what's the craziest that we've had people control? I mean, lighting. We
Yeah, a
had,
lot of like
didn't Def Leppard's guitar player, I mean, not drummer, isn't he using it too, or he was?
yeah. Rick Allen was either is or was using it, for sure, to I think, I'm not sure if it was for like preset switching on electronic drums or sample triggers, or I'm not sure, but definitely that was being used. Let's see here. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of lighting, and a lot of guys doing sort of one man band kind of stuff. So triggering you know loops and synths and just all sorts of stuff. And so that was kind of the thing I was kind of hoping for with the GT, is just like, let's just make something as flexible as possible, and then just see what people do with it, and not try to say this is how you're going to use this thing, and just kind of open it up
Right.
and just kind of
That
see what happens.
that's one of the
It
things I
got
I was gonna say that's one of the things I love about it is any button can do anything. It's not, like in the old days, you used to have the row of preset buttons and those were dedicated. You couldn't change them. And then you had instant access buttons or whatever it was. But with the GT, I mean, you can literally make any button do any function and configure it the way you want it to be. And that's, I mean, that's just amazing. I love it.
Well, and that came from all the text. I mean, when we started doing this, we had already had the rack gizmo out and the effect gizmo and amp gizmo. And so we would talk to techs and say, okay, well, since Mario is no longer doing this, we feel like we could do something interesting. What is it that you don't like about the controllers out there, and what do you like? And that's I think, yeah, that was the feedback that we got from a lot of them, is that we just want any button to be able to do anything.
Yep.
Yeah. And I remember just the way you could program it, by getting into the setup menu, by pressing the two little buttons under the display, and it would bring up the setup menu, and you could just very easily go to each category and program in what you wanted or needed. Whereas with, some of the older controllers, it was sort of more like hexadecimal code. Like you'd have, if you wanted it to do something really custom and specific, you'd have to look up the manual and, okay, I need to enter in this code to do this kind of thing. Whereas, with the GT, it really is super simple. And, my first experience, like I said, at 10 minutes, I was up and running.
It's awesome.
So,
That's cool. It's awesome to hear.
All right, let's see what else we have here.
Mario's got a question for us.
Yeah. Mario wants to know how you became John's tech.
Good question. So let me think back. So when I first started with Dream Theater, I was actually John Mayung and Jordan Rudis's tech. I was the bass and keyboard tech. So I took care of stage right. And that was kind of because I had worked for Deep Purple prior to that, and they were under the same management. Dream Theater was under the same management as Deep Purple. So they kind of shoved me out with Dream Theater 24 years ago, 23 years ago, whatever it was. And then I went back to Deep Purple for a while, did some other gigs, and then Dream Theater was going out again, and I got a call from the tour manager, and he said, John wants you to be his guitar tech. Do you want to do it? And I went, sure. So it was kind of, John was like, he had said, I want Maddi to be my guy. And so that was the Train of Thought tour in 2004 when I came back. We did that tour, and then I went off and did some other stuff when that tour was over, and the schedules didn't quite line up for a few years. And then in 2009, I think, is when I came back, and I've been here ever since.
So how did you get
so the Black Clouds tour in 2009.
So how did you get how did you make the transition into teching for, the big time bands? Like, how did you make that jump? Like, was Deep Purple the first, or was there someone before?
It was a drinking contest. That much I remember. So I kind of fell into being a guitar tech by accident. It was never my ambition. I wanted to work in a recording studio, was my initial ambition. Ended up kind of getting into the live production stuff, doing sound and lights, and I really enjoyed it. So I was, I loved the fast-paced environment of it, and everything's different every day kind of thing. So I did some touring with a sound and lighting company for a while. Ended up working at a lighting company as just a shop guy. So I was building old dimmer, the old dimmer racks and cables and all that stuff. And then a buddy of mine was playing in a band. It was a tribute band. And so I ended up kind of roadieing for him. And he ended up getting a gig with Pat Travers, Canadian guitar player from the 70s and 80s. If you're not familiar, one of his hits is Boom Boom Out Go the Lights, Heat in the Street, stuff like that. So anyway, my friend got the gig playing bass for Pat, called me up one day and said, Pat's looking for a new guitar tech. Are you interested? And I went, I really don't know the first thing about it, other than I was a guitar and bass player, so I knew how to change strings and set up gear. So I said, yeah, sure. And I went over to Pat's house one day. He lived in Orlando, Florida, where I live, and met him. And next thing you know, we're doing a gig. And so that's how I fell into the guitar tech thing. And it was through working for Pat, who was really cool about letting me explore the gig. Like, when I first started, he had a piece of plywood with a bunch of pedals like duct taped to it, and over time I kind of morphed him into a ground control GCX and the original ground control pedal board. And so everything was in a loop, and it was a lot easier for him to switch, and it was a bit more stable. And the old vintage ADA flanger pedals that he used weren't getting stomped on, stuff like that. And then excuse me. So through Pat, I ended up meeting other people in the business, other bands. We would go do festivals in Europe, and the drinking contest that I mentioned, a version of Black Sabbath was playing on the festival. I think it was Tony Iommi, Cozy Powell was on drums, Tony Martin was the vocalist. I don't remember who else was there, but the guy who was taking care of the bass and keyboard player on that, him and I ended up talking in the afternoon. And he goes, yeah, I'm the production manager for Deep Purple. And we're going to be looking for somebody for Steve Morris, because that was around the time that Steve had just gotten into Deep Purple. And coincidentally, he lived in Orlando too. So that was kind of my in eventually with Deep Purple. It took a little while to get there. And then through Deep Purple and all of the touring they did, just met more people. And, through Deep Purple, I met Ronnie James Dio, because we were doing some stuff with an orchestra, and Ronnie was part of it. So I ended up working for Ronnie for a while when Deep Purple wasn't working. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And but really the Dream Theater tie-in came from Dream Theater was a support act on a tour that we did with Deep Purple and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And through that, the management connection. And then, that's kind of how I ended up being John's tech in a very long-winded way around.
Wow, yeah, that's quite a resume there that you built up for yourself leading up to John. That's
cool. Yeah, and I know I'm name dropping a little bit, but it's
that's
some
when you're.
Well, you are a guitar tech for
where we're at. Yeah, I am.
Let's see, what do we have here? Oh, Mark. GT integration with fractal units is awesome. I remember when the XFX 3 was released, sitting in a local brewery with Ron and Sherry and giving my take on the integration. They totally did it. Thank you.
Yeah, we got to get back there, Mark, man. We got to haven't been to that brewery in ages.
Yeah. Okay, so if you guys have other questions, otherwise, Ron, I know you've got ideas of.
Well, I guess one thing, Maddie's got some other stuff going on or coming up.
Oh yeah.
Yes, the other stuff.
The other stuff.
So,
tell us
the other stuff
about the other stuff.
So,
as much as you want to.
So I've got my own company. It's called TechWork Instruments, and starting to get some products ready for release. And really what it is, it's stuff that I've found that I can't find in the current marketplace, or to me just isn't up to like the rigors of touring. And I'm a firm believer that you should be able to throw a piece of gear off of a building and then pick it up and plug it in and it works. That's kind of it doesn't always happen, of course, but for the stuff that I'm working on, some of the products that are currently in the market, I just don't think are they can do that, I guess, is the short way of saying it. So, and actually, Ron, you've helped me, and Sherry, you both have helped me actually get the business off the ground and get going with the first few products. So, I have a website out there. It's techwork-instruments.com. You can go check it out. I don't have anything for sale yet. I'm in the process of ramping up manufacturing. But the first product I'm going to release is it's a TRS splitter. And that sort of stemmed from John's guitars from Music Man, have 2 pickup systems in them, a magnetic and a piezo. And to run them independently, you have to use a TRS cable. And at some point, you have to split it to get to the 2 different outputs. And we've been using this AB box that's been around for, well, since at least 2004, when I came back into the camp. It's been there. And what it does, it takes a TRS input, and then it has 2 separate outputs. And the piezo output is isolated. So what I decided was, well, you know, there's really nothing in the marketplace, and I see guys on forums all the time talking about how can I split the guitar signal out of these guitars. And so I, you know, so why not make one? And so that's what we did. So that's going to be the first product out. And then isolation transformers are always a handy little tool to have in the tech toolkit. You never know when you're going to run into a ground loop somewhere, and to have a good isolation transformer that's transparent and bulletproof is a good thing. So that'll be the second product to roll out. I've got a 1-channel and a 2-channel version of that. So, and all in a standard kind of pedal form factor. So they're small and convenient. And yeah. And then after that, I've got a few more ideas rolling around in my brain. I just need to get some time to sit down and put them on paper and start working it out.
Because I'm sure you have so much free time all the time being a tech.
Yeah. Being a tech, being part of the Tone Mission experience, and my own company and home life, you know, trying to find a few minutes in there to do something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, people really don't understand, you know, not everyone understands how important it is to have isolation transformers. At least, I mean, like, you got to at least, I don't know, I would recommend anyone who's doing any kind of, like, you know, moderately serious guitar rig should have at least 1 or 2 laying around if you're, you know, designing stuff, because it's just, I mean, okay, if you're doing, you know, if you're just doing, you know, pedals into the front of an amp, okay, maybe not. But, you know, you're doing 4 cable method, you're doing more than 1 amp.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're almost certainly going to run into some kind of ground loop somewhere. So it's
yeah, with John's rig, I've got one in the back, because with the rig is in full stereo, so it's 2 amp heads to 2 separate cabinets, and then the Axe Effects resides in between. And the way we split the stereo is we use a TC Electronic Mimic pedal. So it gets a mono in and then stereo out. And the minute I plugged in the amps to that, there was a ground loop. So I just put an isolation transformer in line. Ground loop goes away.
Yeah. I think what I like about your oh, sorry. Go on ahead.
Oh no, I was stopping because you were talking.
Okay, this delay's killing us.
Yeah.
Who put the delay pedal on the live stream? Anyway, but basically, the nice thing about yours especially is you're not afraid to use, like, the good isolation transformers, because a lot of the boxes out there are, you know, they want to, you know, keep that price down to, you know, some level or whatever, and they use the cheap ones, which roll off the high end and the low end. And but you're I know what you're using. You're using the good stuff. So definitely going to be a
and
step above everyone else.
Yeah. And as a tech, for me, that's important. Quality of components, build quality. You know, it's one of those things where it could live in the drawer of your toolbox for 10 years, but all of a sudden you need it, and you got to be able to pull it out, plug it in, and it works, no question. And I've run into situations with other products out there that it's been in the drawer and I need it. I pull it out, and, you know, one of the connections inside broke, or something, you know, it's like it's not working right, or cuts out the signal. And then you got to open it up and try and figure out what's wrong with it to repair it so you can use it. So that was something that, you know, I know it's not going to be an inexpensive item, but I know from my standpoint that it's going to be as bulletproof as it can possibly be. And
Yep.
you'd never, ideally, you'd never have to worry about it not working when you need it. So,
Yeah, that's the key.
Yep.
I have a story.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, why don't you finish your thought there?
Well, I was going to say, your products too are all built to the same level. I mean, we could sit there and just beat on the mastermind, and it just takes it. Like, okay, what else? What else you got?
Yeah, that's, I don't know.
The mini effects gizmo that we use is, it's all great stuff.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. Yeah, we kind of have the same philosophy. It's like, if you're going to do it, do it well. And I guess maybe it's good that none of us here have MBAs or anything like that, so we're not trying to squeeze out the last penny out of every product and things like that. And
speaking of that, Ron and I have spent so many hours and so much time repairing our own washing machines, dryers, ovens, stoves, and you name it. And we believe that products should last for 10, 20, 25 years. And I think our stove is going, or our oven's going on 23 years now. And I think that that's the way we want our products to be, because, who wants to replace your products all the time?
And besides, if this doesn't work out, I have a excellent sideline as an appliance repairman now.
He's learned a lot.
They're so much easier to fix than the stuff that I make. It's far less complicated.
Yeah.
As long as you stick with the cheap
really
ones.
Thankful. I'm really thankful that my father and his father, my grandfather, were all very mechanically inclined. And it was like, you didn't just throw something away when it broke. You took it apart, you fixed it, put it back together, and hopefully you didn't have any screws left over, and you're all set to go. So that was kind of instilled in me from a very young age. And yeah, we do have a same philosophy when it comes to that.
So I was just thinking about the PBC-10, and Maddi was actually, I don't know how to put this, but you were really instrumental in helping us, because I remember Ron and I, for a few years, we were trying to figure out, well, how large do we make it? Which features do we put in or not put in? And I remember distinctly Ron and I being on the phone with you, and you really helping us to figure out what we should put into that PBC-10. And then from the PBC-10, we made the PBC-6X, and that was easier because, we had something bigger so we could have something smaller. But yeah, the PBC-10, I think if you're on Instagram, you saw the picture of us with Maddi, and that was when the PBC-10 first came out. And so Maddi's in the picture with us with that PBC-10.
Yeah, that was, I definitely had a lot of input of just, kind of helping me get to the idea of, like, we just need to do something, basically have a rack style system on a pedal board, and, allow for parallel and allow for stereo, and just kind of, just have all that stuff available, so you can kind of have, now that there are, there've been, some really great, effects, pedals that are, that doing things that, formerly only rack units could do. Now let's have the rest of the rig that, to do all the routing and everything like that.
Yeah. In fact, Tosin Abasi from Animals as Leaders has one on his pedal board, a PBC-10 that he's using.
Does he?
So
Okay.
it's cool to see it out there every day. And the one I have is
post that picture for Dave of LA Sound last week. I promised him I would, but I still haven't gotten up there and done.
No, sorry, Dave.
I'll get that up.
Yeah, so I don't remember what were some of the things that we had talked about when you were designing that.
Well, it was just like, what's the right number of loops, and and yeah, it was just I think the big things were like, there's got to be a section of loops that are both stereo and able to be run in parallel. I think was one of the big things, and that's was a departure from the the existing switchers, which I think at the time were all mono, and So that was I think that was the main thing. And just, and what's, transitioning from doing rack stuff to pedal stuff was really hard because, with rack stuff, it's like it's the form factor it's set. You don't have to guess like how big it's going to be. It's like, okay, is it, 1 unit,
Right.
2 units, or 3? And, okay, maybe how deep is it? But this is like, okay, this is something that can go on a pedal board. And if you make it bigger, you can put more stuff in it. And if you make it smaller, well, it's smaller, and that's better too. And, and it's like everything, it's like just all trade-offs, like literally every dimension of the product and the cost and the feature set. And so, it was just a lot of, I think, should we do this? Should we have this many loops? How many insert points? And I think I just kept running stuff by you. And it's like, should it look like this? The layout. And it was just a real iterative things. I just couldn't figure out, what the right thing was, because there really weren't any limitations, only trade-offs.
Right. And that was to me kind of like growing up in the 80s with all the, seeing all the big racks and all that stuff, always really fascinated me. And then to kind of watch it all move away from that to pedal-based systems. And there was something that kind of got me, the original, whatever the early pedal switchers were. Some of them were just series loops, with just, foot switches. There was nothing very special about them. And then for you to come along and kind of go, okay, well, like you said, let's take what would go in a rack and put it on the floor and have all of that available. And that was really kind of a new way of thinking. So
and I think the other thing I think the other thing that I'm not sure. Well, the other thing that was probably an early design goal, if I recall correctly, just making that decision to, like, instead of just making this controller as its own thing, it basically inherited all the brains and all the MIDI stuff from the Mastermind GT. And so I wasn't sure, because it's like, oh, is this going to be too complicated for the guy who just wants something simple, blah, blah, blah. But, I think that was probably in retrospect, it was probably a good idea, because that's why, we can still be selling it 8 years later, and it's still, good and relevant and all that, because it has all these brains behind there. And if you want to just make it a simple, switcher that can do, preset loop combinations and individual loop control, great. You never have to touch the editor. You never even have to get into the menus. You just do that. And then you can drill in and get the good stuff. And, with the editor, you can get into all the, as much of the MIDI stuff as you could from the bigger MIDI controllers.
So we are,
and that's a cool thing about it. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. This delay. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, that's the cool thing about your products is, the hardware is kind of the simple part, maybe, for lack of a better term, but it's all the processing power behind it, all the firmware and the software and all of that stuff that allow, you can, as time progresses, you can improve it, you can make changes, you can get it to do other things that maybe you never thought of or intended for it to do. And that could be based off of customer requests, whereas back in the old days, it was like the piece of hardware was the piece of hardware. That's it. When you exhaust whatever it is, that's it. So, that's where your stuff comes in a lot better and has the longevity too. Not only is it high build quality, but you can keep improving on the software part of it.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to do that. I mean, it's again, probably maybe not the best MBA business decision, because I'm like always doing firmware updates and all that stuff, and giving them out for free. But yeah, I think, it's the right, it's the way I like to do things. And for me, it's like, we got to put as much value in the box as we can. I mean, we're never going to be the cheap solution, but we want to make it as good and as versatile as possible, for sure.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on 7 o'clock here. I was thinking that we better wrap this up. I know, Maddie, you have to get on don't you have to get on a plane, train, or automobile at like 1 a.m. or something?
On the bus. Yep. So I'll occupy myself until 1 a.m. when we leave and
Oh,
go to
wow.
bed and wake up in Vancouver, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Is there any
Yeah.
last question? Oh.
Any last questions? I don't know.
Here, any
Does anybody
last
posted any questions?
questions that Ron has, or anybody else has, or any other thoughts? Anything else you wanted to say? We definitely need to get people taking a look at that IR tone mission.
Your mission.
Tonemission.com.
Tone.com.
And you can go check out all of Cooper's demos for the different IR packs, and yeah,
And
Well, I
then
purchase
think
and download.
was going to say, I think, Sherry, you might want to take a moment to talk about this Unstrung Heroes thing, because this was your idea. And as we, if you
Yeah.
haven't noticed, this is our very first live stream that we've done. But
we'll get better, we hope.
Sherry's had this idea for years and wanted to do something like this. So maybe a little overview of what the vision is of the whole thing.
All right. Well, the vision is we just know so many of the most amazing guitar techs, and Ron and I always get to hear these fun stories about, like, the hearing impaired system, or all the behind the scenes of what's happening. And I just thought, if these, I came up with that thought, Unstrung Heroes, and I went, oh, that'd be the perfect name for these guitar techs. So I don't think that we're going to be doing this weekly yet. I think every few weeks, and we don't have a set schedule yet. But I've got several other guitar techs from pretty amazing bands that said that they would come on and talk about, the rigs and their stories and whatnot. So I can't announce yet our next live stream, but yeah, if you keep a look at Instagram, I'll post it there.
That and subscribe on YouTube, and you should be able to get notifications from that as well.
Yeah, we finally have somebody that's going to help us with marketing. Ron and I are, well, I guess too old and pretty bad at it, but we're running so many other things. We just really don't have time. So somebody's finally going to be doing we've got a few people helping us. And so, yeah, you'll finally start hearing stuff from us, because we actually are doing a lot in the background. We've got 3 products coming out. We've got the line mixer coming out, and 2 more that I can't mention in the next few weeks, just little
few months, I would say. I wouldn't say
months,
weeks.
months, yes.
Cool stuff is coming. Cool stuff is being worked on, and so it's just if people haven't heard from us, it's because we're just too busy to do anything else.
Yeah, and then once in a while you're helping somebody else. You've helped Maddie, you've helped Friedman, you've helped other companies as well. So we're just not that great at getting the word out of what we're doing, because we're too busy.
Yeah. But this is fun, and yeah, we'll definitely be doing this with some other techs. We've got a lot of great tech friends, and they all have good stories.
Oh, Maddie, thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait for your company you've got 2 companies launching at the same time, basically. And
yeah, that was a I'm not sure what I was thinking there, but no, it's good. The Tone Mission launch has gone really well. Really proud of it. That we had an idea, saw it through to the end. It's out in the wild now. People can check it out. And then, for my company, it's kind of, I'm just sort of soft launching at the moment, nothing official. But it's just kind of ramping up and getting it going. And like I said, you guys have been invaluable to me for doing that. So I really appreciate
somebody wants
all
us
of your
to
help.
link. Tonemission.com is the first one.
Tonemission.com, yeah.
And tech, TECK.
No, just TEK. WERK -instruments.com.
Okay, put that in the chat, and we'll have to put that in the description later.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is fun. We maybe next year or later on down the line, whenever, after you get some more guys on here, we'll come back and revisit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll give us an
This
update
is
on
kind of like
how
this is
everything's coming along.
because this is kind of like how we get to hang out now.
Yeah,
We don't get to
exactly.
see each other that much anymore. So yeah, so this is good.
Out.
But
All right.
awesome.
Well, thanks,
Well,
Maddi. This has
Thanks,
been fun.
Maddie.
Well,
And thanks everyone for
thanks, Ron.
watching.
Thanks, Sherry. This has been great. Yeah,
And
we'll watch
we'll catch you all
watch
next
the
time.
replay later.
There you go.
All right.
All
See
right.
ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.